feet of lead shielding. But here's what they really had for protection.
Obviously, the only shielding they had was the literally paper-thin outer hull of aluminum, and their suits consisting of glass fiber, some aluminum fibers, and silicon rubber.
It's very interesting concerning radiation that the astronauts were protected by a thin film of aluminum when here on Earth they put a lead shield on us when they take a dental x-ray.
In conclusion, when NASA themselves admit to never having left low Earth orbit, and the fact that we don't even have the materials that could withstand the extreme temperatures and cosmic rays in space, how on earth can anyone believe that we ever went to the moon?
Now, as a former NASA fanboy myself, I have to say that was a really hard pill to swallow. But over the last few years, I've become more than convinced that we never went to the moon. And this belief was only further solidified the more I began to analyze the pictures allegedly shot on the moon. I have to say, I don't think they counted on Photoshop. Because you can take these images into image processing software such as Photoshop, adjust the contrast, and see stuff like this. Strange masks and rectangular boxes around the Earth. I even found one on the Apollo 17 mission itself, right here on the NASA website, Scientists on the Moon. Click on this picture right here. Supposedly the same mission, same guys that took the picture of the most famous picture of our Earth. I'm going to do save image as, and let's see, Apollo Moon, let's call it Apollo Moon 17. And I'm going to open that in Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on the Earth. I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Levels, and I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. Why is there a square box around the Earth allegedly taken from the scientists on the moon in Apollo 17? And people wonder why I don't trust NASA. That's why I don't trust NASA. I mean, they're always out there saying, you know, Rob, everybody's trying to show you stuff from space and you keep rejecting it. This is why I reject it. These guys are liars. So, I mean, if we never went to the moon, then this picture is not real. Since then, they've put out many more what they call blue marble alleged photographs of our Earth. The problem is they're all vastly different. The continent sizes change from year to year. The colors change. There's no consistency. The most famous one of the blue marbles was the one done in 2002. But if you take it into Photoshop and start zooming in on it, you begin to see where clouds were replicated using the clone tool. I mean, even its creator, Rob Simmons, admits it is Photoshop, but it has to be. And when you look into time-lapse videos, it's just as bad, if not worse. Here's the one that got me questioning everything. You can check it out on the JPL website. Supposedly, it was shot from the Galileo space probe back in 1990. Well, I mean, the first thing that caught my attention was none of the clouds are moving. I could take my camera outside, point it up at the sky for an hour, speed it up in my computer, and see the clouds doing all kinds of stuff. But on that day back in 1990, this didn't happen anywhere in the world. And NASA and JPL are bad enough, but the stuff coming from other countries isn't any better. In 2008, this video was put out allegedly shot from a Japanese satellite. Besides looking pathetically amateur, where are all the stars? I mean, look, we get all these images from Hubble, right? Space is full of stars, beautiful colors, nebula, stuff like that. Every time we watch a sci-fi movie, you know, the planets are hanging there against the backdrop of zillions of stars. But when it comes to any alleged satellite imagery of our Earth, we never see any stars. Even HD footage like this, you can beef up the contrast and look. I mean, HD's got a lot of information. There's no information in this video for stars. I mean, it should look something like this, but it doesn't. Later, I saw this video from 2011. I think it's supposedly from a Russian satellite, and it also allegedly represents a real time lapse of one full day of the Earth. And when I compare this with the one from 1990, both again full day time lapses, the striking difference becomes obvious. I think what we're seeing here is merely the advancement in computer animation technology over the course of about 20 years. And here's an example of that technology. This is 100% CGI and admitted to be such. And then we have what I call the bozo Earth of 2015. And just like back in 1990, once again, the clouds aren't morphing. You can back it up, freeze frame it, go back and forth with it. You'll see the clouds aren't morphing, changing, or anything. They are just following the ball as it rolls around in a time-lapse animation. And don't even get me started on all the problems with this moon. I've got longer videos that deal with that. So if we put them all together, once again, when it comes to time-lapse videos, just like the still imagery, there's no consistency. Over and over and over again, I was finding doctored imagery and or stuff openly identified in the fine print as being a composite image or some form of CGI. The question is, why? Suffice to say, we simply cannot trust imagery from NASA or any other nation's space agency. It's all garbage. And the sad part is it's only going to get worse because computer software just keeps getting better and better and better. For instance, Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot just released this plugin for After Effects.
Alright, so there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with this plugin, and you'll be even more amazed when you see how fast and easy it is to use.
So, there you go. You just can't trust what's coming. They say, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." Well, I mean, if someone continues to believe a proven pathological liar, well, then they're an idiot. So, I'm saying let's not be idiots here. These people have proven themselves time and time again to be fraudulent. Once you realize the Apollo program was bogus, start looking into the space shuttle program. There's a lot of interesting things about that. And then, of course, start looking into the ISS. And you got to ask yourself, if we know for a fact that they faked stuff in Apollo, and we've got reasonable doubt about some of the space shuttle missions, and more videos coming out exposing the ISS with footage just like this, there's lots of stuff out there. There's some really good YouTubers out there who have been watching these guys like a hawk and pulling down footage like this. These people are lying to us with our money. Tens of millions of dollars a day they're lying to us. So yeah, when you've got so many videos exposing what's going on up there as a fraud, I'm sorry, but the so-called photographic evidence simply is not that compelling, especially if you actually take the time to look into it.
And unfortunately, I did take the time to look into it. Because unlike 99.9% of my detractors who regularly make fun of me, none of them have done any research. None of them have tested anything. They haven't bought the Nikon Coolpix P900. They haven't read any books. They haven't taken the time to go through picture after picture after picture on the NASA website, JPL website, and comb through footage of the space shuttle and the ISS and everything else to see these things. This was the beginning of my journey, folks. And you want to know how I started out? I'm going to debunk this whole flat earth thing. Funny how people who set out to debunk stuff end up becoming converts. So, word of advice, if you're here and you're not yet buying into this, I dare you to look into it. I double dog dare you to try to disprove it. That was the preface, okay? How did I get into flat earth? Well, it really started with this guy right here. John Gabrielson's a friend of mine. He puts on the Back to the Future conference in Austin, Texas, and he comes up to Dallas where I live every now and then, and whenever he does, we always go out to eat. And we went out to eat one day, and he says, "So, Rob, you ever wonder, how does water bend?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? Water doesn't bend. It finds its own level." He's like, "Yeah, think about that the next time you look at the Pacific Ocean on a globe." What? Shut up and eat your burger. What are you talking about, But he put that seed in my head that rattled around in there for a little while until I stumbled across a podcast with this guy right here, Mark Sargent, being interviewed by Canary Cry Radio about his Flat Earth Clues videos. Now, I started listening to this video thinking this is an April Fool's joke. This was April 13th, 2015, thinking this is ridiculous, this is stupid. But by an hour and a half later, I'm going, shoot, that guy kind of made a little bit of sense. So I listened to the whole thing again. That was April 13th, 2015. 2 days later, on April 15th, I had him on my radio show. That is now the date that I affectionately refer to as the day Mark Sargent ruined my life. Because he challenged me. Okay, Rob, you believe the globe, great, I get it, prove it. But prove it without using NASA, the government, or the military as your source. Well, of course, all the information that we have about the spinning heliocentric globe model is coming from NASA, the government, or the military. Well, all the stuff that I showed you before was me answering his challenge. I didn't listen to him, though. I went to NASA, the government, and the military, and I started looking at all this stuff because we've all seen the pictures. We've all seen it. I mean, this guy's an idiot, right? And then as I start looking into it, I'm like, composite? Artist rendition? Clone clouds? None of the clouds moving? What's happening here? So then I start, there's got to be something else out there. I stumble on this guy, and he seemed to have like a ton of content out there, Eric Dubay. And I thought he was the most articulate guy I'd ever heard, at least on this topic. And then I realized what he was doing is he was spending a lot of time reading on the air books like this. Zetetic Astronomy by Samuel Robotham. 100 Proofs Earth's Not a Globe by William Carpenter. And this book right here, Terraform of the Earth, Not a Planet, proved from Scripture, Reason, and Fact by David Warlaw Scott, written in 1901. Once I realized where he was getting this information, I went and bought those books and I read them. And I read them in the order that I just showed you. Oh, actually, I read it in the reverse order of what I just showed you. I started reading this book right here first, and he was quoting from the other guys. So I'm like, okay. So I put that book down. I went and found the other guys. I read the other books, and they were good, but then I went back to this book, and this book really radically changed my life. He was an elderly man at the end of a life of time of ministry, was called to take a stand on what the scriptures have to say, could barely see as he's writing this book. He's writing in the beginning of it like, this is a labor of love. I can barely even see the page, you know. It's like 300-something pages of a labor of love. And at the end of this book, I'm paraphrasing, but like the last few pages of it, he said, I have done what I was called to do. Now, dear reader, it's up to you. And I felt like this guy was reaching across a century of time, handing out a baton saying, are you going to take it, Rob? And I wept like a baby at the pool of my apartment complex as I was reading this. And I prayed about it. I'm like, Father, I got to figure out what's going on here, because these guys are laying out a biblical case for all this stuff. Man. Meanwhile, there's this other character, Jaron Campanello, who's out there actually doing tests. I mean, he's doing long-distance tests with lasers and stuff. And he had this 4-mile test where he had a laser like 6 inches off the ground. 4 miles away, it was being picked up by the camera. Well, you do the math on the ball. It's supposed to be, you know, we're supposed to be on a 25,000-mile circumference ball. The math is roughly 8 inches per mile squared. You shouldn't be able to see that. And this guy's out there doing it. I'm going, wow. And then I see a video of this guy. He claimed to be a photorealistic painter for NASA, painting stuff for NASA. And he had a whole comic routine out there, you know, talking, is it real or is it a painting? You know, now I'm an artist myself. And if I really applied myself, I can get really close to photorealism. It's been a long time since I've done that, but you know, he does that, and he was talking about, well, I started thinking about what he was saying, and check this out. All these images up here, none of these are all paintings. Those are not real sculptures on the bottom there. Those are paintings. A friend of mine did paintings of sculptures. And the pictures up above, those aren't real glasses of wine. Somebody painted that. Now, putting it in perspective, which do you think is harder to paint? So I'm listening to Matt Boyle, and I'm going, well, he's got a reasonable case there. You know, and then I showed you, you know, all the other stuff that I went into. So, listen to this.
I'm a visualization scientist. I basically try to come up with ways of explaining complex science stories through the visuals and developing artwork and illustrations that actually can help explain the science story to people.
For decades, popular culture and shows like Star Trek inspired a generation of scientists by envisioning what space might look like. But wait, what does space actually look like? Heart nebulas, celestial collisions, a bird's eye view of the Milky Way, astronomers are charting the outer reaches of the cosmos and bringing back jaw-dropping images from telescopes like Hubble and its infrared cousin Spitzer. If you look down at the bottom of that Milky Way image, you'll see these two words: artist concept. This sweeping image of the Orion Nebula actually looks like this. And the TRAPPIST-1 star system, the latest discovery of 7 potentially habitable exoplanets that made national headlines, it's really only a box of gray and white pixels. You see, space art is part of NASA, and it has been since before we went to the moon.
They're just openly admitting it. The problem is we've all been fooled by space art, including that. The most famous picture we all have seen in our textbooks. I had that as wallpaper, okay? One whole wall in my bedroom was the surface of the moon with the Earth behind it. That itself was a composite image because there's no way the Earth looked like that from the moon, on the surface of the moon. So it was a composite image that even on my wall, you know? And then, of course, we've seen this before where they year after year, they put out blue marbles and they're all looking different. Now, you can write off the color issue by filters. Okay, because they'll say, well, the different satellites that took these pictures had different filters, and that's why the color is different. Sure, but that's not going to increase the continent size of the United States and, you know, other things like that, right? Something's seriously wrong here. What's the deal? If we're out there doing these things, why can't we just take a Polaroid shot without having it to be doctored in any way? You know, so it starts getting you questioning. And then you start looking at all the other ridiculous, pardon my language, crap that NASA's always putting out. You know, I started looking into various different things, other stupid things that we believe. First of all, you see that they had a very early relationship with Walt Disney. And there's all kinds of things we can talk about Disney, and Freemasonry and pedophilia and all kinds of other sick things there. But they had a relationship right there because that was their propaganda machine. And you may have seen some of the videos out there how there's all kinds of phallic symbols and other sexual things that the artists have embedded in all kinds of the family-friendly cartoons that we watched, you know, from Walt Disney. Well, isn't it interesting that they put some of the same stuff even in pictures of the Earth where the clouds are magically spelling sex, right? And found this out also. This character right here, Pluto, was created by Walt Disney in 1930, coincidentally the same year we discovered the planet Pluto. And then decades later, we finally send a probe out there, and what do you know? There's an image of Pluto on Pluto. Imagine the coincidence. They're laughing at us. Seriously? There's a spot on Pluto that just so happens to look like Pluto? Wow. Okay, and right before that, news articles came out. I can't even believe that people believe this. They were trying to capture the shadow of Pluto going across the Earth as a distant star shone light on the planet Pluto, and Pluto's something like 5 billion miles away, and they were saying that the light from a distant star was going to illuminate Pluto from behind and cast a shadow for a few seconds on the Earth, and they were going to go measure it. Think about that for a little bit. Really? And that was just right before. It says the occultation happened at a unique time, just 2 weeks before NASA's New Horizons mission will make its nearest approach to Pluto on 14 July 2015. You're seeing the shadow of Pluto. What about Jupiter and Saturn? Much bigger. We should have shadows all over the place. We should be dodging shadows of planets with all those stars shining on them. Give me a break. They're telling us that there's all of these different Earth-like planets out there, right? How many of you guys been following the news on that? You know, they keep saying, that video I just showed you a minute ago, really all they were looking at is a couple of, you know, gray blocks. What's even worse, though, is how far away these things are. How far away these things, and how far away they say that they're looking, right? Do you know how far a light year is? 1 light year is approximately 6 trillion miles. They're telling us we're looking across thousands of light years. 3,000, that's 3,000 times 6 trillion. Oh, it gets worse than that. They said that they saw a black freaking hole at 55 million light years away. 55 million times 6 trillion. You got a telescope that can see that far? Zoom